Welcome back to HistoryCrafts. Back in the days, in medieval Europe, a knight might rule more than just one land. A prince could be a duke, a count, and maybe even a king. Titles passed from one noble house to another, through treaties, inheritances, and marriages. But with each shift, they would reshape the political map of Europe. Out of all the monarchs Europe ever had, one stood above the rest. A man who didn't just have one or two, but over a dozen royal titles. He was emperor, king, archduke, count, and lord of lands so vast that the sun literally never set on his empire. Today we talk about Charles V, the most titled ruler in history, and the man who tried to hold Europe and the world together. Charles' full name was Charles of Habsburg, or Karl von Habsburg, and he was born on the 24th of February 1500 in Ghent, which is today Belgium. But he wasn't just any royal baby. His bloodline was a political superweapon forged through centuries of marriage deals and royal strategies. His father was Philip the Handsome, the son of Maximilian I, Holy Roman Emperor, and heir to the Habsburg dynasty, a dynasty already powerful in Central Europe. And actually, Maximilian I is a very interesting character, I have to say. I'm also going to do a video about him at some point. His mother was Joanna of Castile, the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic monarchs who united Spain and kicked off the Age of Exploration. So from the moment Charles was born, he was destined to inherit very much. Dynastic fortune smiled on him in a way it never had for any ruler before or after. By the age of 6, after his father's sudden death, Charles became Duke of Burgundy and ruler of the wealthy and powerful Low Countries. And these weren't any backwater lands, They were the economic heart of Europe, filled with trade cities like Brugg or Antwerp. By 16, after the death of his maternal grandfather Ferdinand, he became King of Spain. That meant he ruled both Castile and Aragon, effectively uniting Spain under one crown. And with Spain came Naples, Sicily, Sardinia, and overseas possessions in the Americas. 3 years later, Charles' grandfather Maximilian died in 1519, and with his death, the most powerful title in Europe was up for grabs: Holy Roman Emperor. But unlike other royal titles, this wasn't inherited. It had to be won by election. Charles faced stiff competition, especially from Francis I of France, who also had money and ambition. Both men launched enormous bribery campaigns to sway the 7 prince electors. And it's kind of funny because in the end, Charles outbribed his rival, thanks to the immense loans given by the Fugger banking family of Augsburg. He was elected emperor and crowned in Aachen in 1520. Later, in 1530, Pope Clement VII crowned him again in Bologna, making Charles the last emperor in history to receive a papal coronation. Before we continue, let's take a second to appreciate the sheer absurdity of Charles' title collection. Like I said, he was Holy Roman Emperor, King of Spain, he was King of Germany, King of Naples, Sicily and Sardinia, Archduke of Austria, Duke of Burgundy and Milan, Count of Flanders, Hainaut, Holland and Zeeland. He was the titular King of Jerusalem even, and he was the Lord of the Americas and the Philippines. Each of these titles carried real authority, governed real people, and wielded real power. From the frozen Alps to the Amazon jungle, Charles ruled. In essence, Charles V was the product of careful dynastic engineering. His family had spent generations marrying strategically, and now it all paid off. No ruler before or since has ever ruled such a diverse empire by birthright alone. Ruling half of Europe might sound nice, but Charles spent most of his life at war. His lifelong enemy was Francis I of France. And if you remember, he was one of his opponents for the election of the Holy Roman Empire. They fought over Italy, specifically Milan, as part of the broader Italian wars. And their biggest showdown came in 1525 at the Battle of Pavia, where Charles' troops not only defeated the French army, but also captured Francis himself. Just imagine, a king in chains. That was the true ultimate power move. And Francis was forced to sign the Treaty of Madrid, which required him to renounce claims to Italy, surrender Burgundy, and even send his sons as hostages to Spain. But once released, he immediately repudiated the treaty, claiming it had been signed under duress. The wars with France would continue for decades. The League of Cognac, a Franco-Papal alliance formed in 1526, fought Charles to curb his dominance in Italy. His German troops, led by Georg von Frundsberg, marched on Rome. Though Frundsberg suffered a stroke before the final attack, his troops sacked Rome in 1527, shocking all of Europe. Ironically, this Catholic emperor's troops had just devastated the seat of Christendom. Also, if you want to know more about Frundsberg, you can check out the video made about him. And then of course, there was also a revolution from within, the Protestant Reformation. In 1521, Charles summoned Martin Luther to the Diet of Worms, demanding that he recant his writings. But Luther refused, famously saying, "Here I stand, I can do no other." Protestantism spread rapidly, especially in the German states. Some princes supported it for religious reasons, and others for political power. As the Reformation spread, Charles attempted to control the printing press. Yes, already back then there was censorship. He banned Lutheran texts and tried to suppress the flood of pamphlets and Bibles, but it was impossible, of course. Gutenberg's revolution was out of the bottle, and Charles knew it. In the East, Charles faced a much different kind of threat, the Ottoman Empire, led by Suleiman the Magnificent. In 1529, the Ottomans besieged Vienna, striking at the heart of Europe. And Charles' forces also launched campaigns in Hungary, captured Tunis in 1535, and attempted to retake Algiers in 1541, but failed. During his reign, the Spanish Empire expanded rapidly across the Atlantic. He supported and authorized key expeditions, including Hernán Cortés' conquest of the Aztec Empire and Francisco Pizarro's invasion of the Inca Empire, both of which brought immense wealth to Spain. Charles also backed Magellan's expedition, which completed the first circumnavigation of the globe, marking a milestone in global navigation. And though not directly involved in conquests, Charles established colonial administrative systems, appointed viceroys, and implemented laws like the New Laws of 1542 to regulate treatment of indigenous people, though enforcement was limited. His reign laid the foundations of the Spanish colonial empire and reshaped the world as we know it. To divide the non-European world, Charles signed the Treaty of Zaragoza with Portugal in 1529. It complemented the earlier Treaty of Tordesillas. And this time it settled rights to Asia, especially the Spice Islands. Portugal got the Moluccas, while Spain focused westward. It was basically a colonial line in the sand, they just divided it. The Schmalkaldic League was a military alliance of Protestant princes in Germany. Charles fought them to restore Catholic unity, winning the Battle of Mühlberg in 1547. But the victory was short-lived. Protestantism remained and the empire's internal division deepened. Europe had changed and Charles' dream of a united Christendom was fading. Charles himself wasn't a flashy ruler. He was devout, hardworking, and prone to depression. Charles suffered from gout, jaw deformities, and crippling joint pain. The famous Habsburg jaw, a severe underbite, was the result of generations of inbreeding within the royal house. It made eating and speaking difficult and was passed on to many of his descendants. He married his cousin, Isabella of Portugal, and it was reportedly a happy union. Charles and Isabella had 7 legitimate children, but only 3 of them survived their adulthood. For example, Philip II of Spain, who would inherit the Spanish crown and much of his father's empire. Maria of Austria, who married into the Hungarian and Bohemian royal families. And of course, John of Austria, his illegitimate son, who would later defeat the Ottomans at the famous Battle of Lepanto in 1571. which you also can check out in this video over here. His court was filled with cultural and intellectual heavyweights. For example, Titian, who painted some of the most iconic royal portraits of Charles. Erasmus of Rotterdam, whose ideas helped define Renaissance humanism. And Gattinara, Charles' chancellor, who championed the vision of a global Christian empire. And despite the wars, Charles founded art, architecture, and philosophy, most notably supporting the construction of the El Escorial Palace Monastery complex, which his son would later complete. And he also would commission grand works from artists like Titian. His reign wasn't just about conquest, it was also about culture. After decades of ruling, fighting, and failing to preserve Catholic unity, Charles was tired. By 1556, he had enough. He shocked Europe by voluntarily abdicating his titles. He gave Spain, the Low Countries, and the Americas to his son Philip II, as I said before. And he handed the imperial crown to his brother, Ferdinand I. Then, he retired to a secluded monastery in Yuste, Spain. And there, he lived a quiet life, surrounded by books, clocks, and religious devotion. Even in retirement, Charles remained engaged with the world. He wrote letters, reviewed politics, and struggled with his health, of course. He died in 1558, aged at 58. His tomb was symbolic. It contained soil from Jerusalem, water from the Nile, and dust from Rome, representing the spiritual geography of his empire. In my opinion, a little bit too much, but hey. He died not with a sword in hand, like many other kings and emperors do, right? But with the rosary. Charles V ruled more territory than any monarch before him, and most after him. I mean, sure, British Empire, right? But his empire was built on delicate alliances, fragile unity, and the illusion that Europe could be held together by just one man. He tried to fight religious division, rival kings, and foreign empires, and although he achieved several major military victories, including at Pavia and Mühlberg, he ultimately couldn't maintain the unity of his vast empire. He was not a conqueror in the mold of Alexander and Napoleon, you know. He was a ruler by inheritance and ambition, fighting not for glory, but maybe for just stability, right? For a moment, he stood at the center of the world, king of kings, emperor of emperors, but that's of course just only in Europe, right? I hope you learned something new and also enjoyed this video. About what other historical topic, event, or figure should I make a video about? Let me know in the comments. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. This is HistoryCrafts, where history crafts itself.